The lessons I've learned over the years, and I like numbers, is just look at them, figure out what it is, help people estimate better, find ways to produce something actually more efficiently. And if you can figure a way to do it more efficiently than others, that's great. Now, I'm not talking about cutting corners. I'm never about cutting corners. And if you're in a community that requires home inspections or inspections in general, then if they're doing their job, they shouldn't allow you to cut corners. You ever gone over budget? I have too. It's not the end of the world, but we're going to want to stop that because you do enough of those, they're going to put us out of business. And I love the world of percentages, and we'll talk about those percentages in just a moment. But in today's episode, we're going to talk about what you do when you actually go over budget and how to prevent that in the future. And I said, going over budget, I like the world of percentages. You're going to have actually a 33% chance of making money, a 33% chance of breaking even, and 33% chance of losing money. And obviously, we'll keep those losing monies to a minimum or negative, actually, zeros. Breaking even, I don't want to do that either if we can keep from it, but we want those profits. And what we're going to talk about is actually making those happen in ways that can prevent that. Y'all remember back in 2020 when the prices of OSB was getting nuts and you couldn't get any materials? Some of you might even think of that still today sometimes. But you had to prepare, and depending on your project and so forth. What I did was I told the bank. I had a draw system with the bank on a new construction house, and I told them, I said, hey, if you want to freeze these prices, because they were changing, well, sometimes daily on the OSB, you can give me all the materials up front, and I'm going to go write a check, and we're going to buy them all and lock those prices in. And that's what happened. Now, there's a lot of fear going on today with my buddy Trump and all the tariffs. And actually, there's companies out there taking advantage. Matter of fact, I did one the other day, and my HVAC guy, and the tariffs went up 7% automatically. And he said, well, that's from his supplier. And he passed it on to me, obviously. And I want to pass it on to the customer. But that 7% went up, and it's on the equipment they had sitting in the floor. And he said, well, that's stuff that you haven't even paid at 7%. And well, that's company wide, and they're just taking advantage of us. And there's nothing you can do about it, really. That part. But what you can do to protect yourself is when you give a quote out, you tell the customers that, put it in writing in your quote, that prices vary based on whether hurricanes, natural disasters, even the tariffs at this current part of our politics. But you can also give some reassurances to your clients too, because that's not always fair. But you can tell them that your prices are good for X amount of days. That gives them a little benefit and actually can help you in your sales, because you can say, hey, I need you to make a decision now. And if you don't and you decide to wait another 45 days or whatever, those prices could go up. And that's just usually enough to get you in that conversation of, well, let's pull the trigger. And that's what you're trying to do, is get those sales and get them tied up. What you want to do is protect yourself. Once they agree to that, is let your vendors know that you are wanting to lock those prices in. And if you have 30 days notice or pay terms, they're going to be just fine. Get those money, get them paid, get everything locked in. That's what's most important. Now, it's always, when you go over budget, it's not always about the fact of or tariffs or natural disasters. It's the fact of the customer changes things. And those are change orders. You got to prepare yourself for those. And it's hard to get a customer that doesn't change your mind. But if you do get a change order, get those in writing. And I believe, more importantly, figure out who's able to approve those change orders. Especially if you have a bank. Banks usually only approve a certain amount of money to build a house. In this particular case, in my particular case, we talk about house building. And so I want to talk to the bank, say, hey, if there's a change order, is it okay if the customer approve it? Or do you have to approve it? Some banks will tell you they have to approve the change orders. In the long scheme of things, it's their house anyway until the customer pays it off. And you want to make sure you get your funds. But make sure somebody signs off on those. If you don't have a procedure, obviously create one. But make sure any change orders you can get approved. Now, my personal opinion is when you first price a job, you're based on going in, getting out with your plans, and you have a certain margin. I think your margins for change orders need to be more. Not because you're greedy, it's because you're disrupting your flow and your efficiencies. So you need to make up for that change. Now, there's a local contractor. He bought a boat, and the name of his boat is change orders. So I know that's where a lot of contractors make a lot of their money. They just anticipate the customer's going to make some change, and you do have them. You got them by the cojones at this point because somebody has to make a decision, and banks will usually say yes because they know it's probably a good thing or they needs to happen, or they're going to turn around and charge their customer, the end user, more, and they don't really care. But as long as they've got the resources, then banks will say yes and approve the change orders. Lastly, not making money. Well, maybe you missed the mark on your quotes. And in the perfect world, you're watching those on a ongoing basis, like a daily. You can almost know in real time what your costs are. That's not always the case with contractors like us. We're getting our bills. We know what the quote was. Something happened. Always have a contingency built into your number because I always forget something. And as good as I get, and if I do forget something, you always add that to your next time you quote something, but add a contingency. So you have some play. And it also gives you an opportunity not to go back to the customer every time something goes up or down. You got some play in there that, well, don't worry about it. I'm going to eat that cost because I already got it built in. Remember when I mentioned those change orders? Well, the other part is that somebody might be changing something and your crews aren't billing or letting you know there's a change order. And you're absorbing the cost, you didn't even know it. And it's something you probably could have turned around and charged for. Make sure you got those procedures in place on your change orders. I have a policy when we bid jobs, not bid jobs, when we invoice jobs, that I want to see all the jobs we lost money on. Now, I love seeing all the jobs, but that's like a KPI. You want to notice, give me the job that didn't make money on it. Why? Because you're expecting to make money on the other ones or even break even. And if you get to a point where you're really sophisticated, I want to see all jobs that don't make a certain percentage. But right now, let's just start small. Start with the ones you're not making money on. Figure out why. Is it your estimating? Is your costing? Is it just the fact that you didn't have enough materials and you had to buy more and you didn't know that? Now, fortunately, a lot of lumber yards, if they're selling you materials and give you quotes, they're going to overcharge you, meaning they're going to order more than you need, which is good for you because then you get returns, you get some money back, and they like the sales. And some people, and some contractors, if you're thinking like a lumber yard, my brother actually runs one. If you got crews that I don't want to say don't care, don't pay attention, and they cut a board wrong or whatever, well, we got extra boards here. We're not worried about that. Well, you need to find out, is there waste going involved? Are you using more lumber or materials than you should be? Look at that. Because if you're using, say, 20% more studs than you need, and you know it from the plan, and the plan hasn't changed, then somebody's not doing something right as far as studs wise, or taking them home, or whatever the hell it could be possible. But check those numbers. See why you didn't make any money on that job. Put things in place that can catch those type of things. So what's it look like when you put all these items together? Well, you're going to run better. You're going to have better cash flow. You've got you shouldn't have to worry as much either, especially if you got a signed agreement that your change order is made. You've got a working foreman out there, as we've talked about before, that somebody you got responsible. Go to that person if the job's not being run. Ask them why it's not being. Hey, why are we using X amount more boards? He could have a very legitimate reason. And in that case, then you need to get with your estimators and make sure that they're taking those techniques or whatever it is that's causing that usage and building into the price. Lastly, before I go into shifting gears here, get with your bookkeeper or your accountant or whoever it is and talk about overhead. Overhead on the scope of things can make you lose money. So there's only two ways really to do the overhead and make it. A, you can reduce your overhead. And I like three. I like thirds. And B, you could be right on money with your overhead, and you know where it's at, and you got it built into your pricing. Or C, you have too much overhead. And the way to take care of that is to spread out more sales. The more sales you have, you get to spread that overhead over more. So be more efficient in your time and your production. Make your teams more efficient so you can get more billing through the month. That'll spread out your overhead as well. The lessons I've learned over the years, and I like numbers, is just look at them, figure out what it is, help people estimate better, find ways to produce something actually more efficiently. And if you can figure out a way to do it more efficiently than others, that's great. Now, I'm not talking about cutting corners. I'm never about cutting corners. And if you're in a community that requires home inspections or inspections in general, then if they're doing their job, they shouldn't allow you to cut corners. That doesn't always happen because some of those inspectors come out there and they just had a they get given a checklist by their boss and they don't know nothing about construction. I know you guys probably seen some of those too. But you want to do a good quality job and the most efficient way using less waste and figure out where you're at for your costing. That being said, if you guys like what you talked about and need help, talk about maybe doing the cost sheets or looking at your procedures for change orders, look in the show notes below, set up a time with me. I'll be happy to go over with you and figure out ways to make sure you don't go over budget. This is Chris G. and Hard Hat CEO. We thank you for your time, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.